Hello, my name is Blackwell, and welcome back to this Boltyn Armory deck unboxing. These decks just came out this past Friday, July 12th. They retail for $40, and you can find them at your local game store. I have followed the spoilers for this a bit, so I'm familiar with the new cards in it, but I have not taken an in-depth look at the full deck list. So we're going to get into that today. I'm going to give you my thoughts, give you an overview of what cards are in it, and yeah. If there's interest, I may do a upgrade guide for this deck. I do play Boltyn in Classic Constructed, planning to play him in a ProQuest in New Jersey coming up soon, next weekend. So if you're interested in seeing my build that uses a lot of these cards and is still relatively budget, I'm happy to put one together. So let's get into it. We have one of the new cards up front. Generally, I have been a fan of these Armory decks. Give me one moment to get this open. Generally, I have been a fan of these Armory decks so far. We've gotten the Boltyn as well as the KO Armory decks, and I think they've spoiled that the Azalea one is coming next. Excited to see what they do with that. I know they revealed some of the equipment. Alright, so first up here we have Saving Grace, which is one of the new cards. This is a defense reaction. As you'll notice, for any of the new cards, you get the first copy in rainbow foil. So for the equipment, you're going to get them all in rainbow foil. For any non-equipment cards, I believe they give you 1 rainbow foil and 2 non-foil. So let's talk about Saving Grace first. This is a yellow defense reaction, and it's a light warrior card. Being yellow, being light, and being a warrior card are all important for Boltyn. A lot of his cards care specifically about yellow, and a lot of cards, such as V of the Vanguard and Lumina Ascension, care specifically about it being a light card, so those elements are great. This is a 0 for 3 defense reaction, which is on par for defense reactions, but it has these additional effects where, as an additional cost to play it, you may charge your hero's soul, which, if you're unfamiliar with Boltyn, allows you to take a card from your hand, put it into your soul to be used for later effects. And if you've charged this turn, target attack gets -2. Now, one thing to note here is that the if you've charged this turn does not necessarily have to check for Saving Grace's additional cost. So you can combine this with your equipment that charge to get the -2 from this without having to charge to its effect. At that point, this becomes way above rate for a yellow card. Usually for defending, the highest rate you're going to get in Flesh and Blood is 4, such as on a Sink Below, a Fate Foreseen, or a Test of Strength for one card, and those are red. Usually yellow is the most you can expect is 3. So if you are able to get this for 0 for 5, then this becomes far above rate. Now, one card to bring up, and this is the only card I'm going to bring up in this video that is not in this deck, but that is a highly recommended upgrade, is Soulbond Resolve. So Soulbond Resolve reads, when this defends, you may charge your hero's soul, which is good. But the important part, and the one that synergizes with a lot of cards in this deck, is the first time you would be dealt damage each turn, if you've charged this turn, prevent 1 of that damage. So, Soulbond Resolve synergizes with effects like Saving Grace or your equipment, which we'll get into in a moment, to prevent an additional damage. So you're getting an additional point of defense out of any of your charging on your opponent's turn. So this is a highly recommended upgrade if you're going to stick with the more mid-range Raiden build presented in this Armory deck. This card should not be too expensive, so it can be a good first upgrade for a new player. Moving on from there, we get some of the new equipment. These look really pretty in rainbow foil. I have a lot of my Boltyn deck rainbow foiled out. I kind of decided to forgo the cold foils for that deck just because I love how the rainbow foiling looks with the light cards. I'm going to lay out these 3 for now because they all have similar effects, so let's talk about them together. So we have Warpath of Winged Grace, which is in the warrior or in the leg slot. We have Bracers of Bellona's Grace, which is in the arm slot, and we have Helm of Halo's Grace, which is in the head slot. Oh, apologies for bumping the camera there. All of these are 2-block blade break equipment. When this defends, you can charge And depending on the equipment, you get a different effect if you charged a yellow card. So for the legs, we get a quicken token. For the arms, we get a courage token, and for the head, we get to draw a card. So like I mentioned, this synergizes really well with Soul Bond Resolve because you can get the additional point of prevention off of any of these charge effects when you defend with them. An important thing to remember with Boltyn decks as well is that a lot of times you are dependent on having cards in your soul in order to play your most powerful cards or gain the go again necessary to have a big pop off turn. So when you charge something to one of these effects, you're not just giving up a card for that effect. You are getting the value that putting a card into soul can give you, which can a lot of times turn into a lot of additional value for, damage down the line. All of these are great. I think the head equipment is probably the best just because it effectively gives you a free charge because it replaces it with a draw card. But both the Warpath and Bracers are very strong, and I think these will see play in any Raiden build. So these are a great foundation to get with the Armory deck. The other piece of equipment we get in this deck is Solar Plexus. This is a light equipment, so it is not locked to Warrior. That reads, destroy this, banish a card from your soul. Yellow cards cost you 1 resource less to play this turn. This can certainly be effective in Boltyn. This will allow you to do things like play a V of the Vanguard for free. Notably, this applies to any yellow cards you play that turn, so you could put together some kind of interesting build that uses cards like Art of War to really try and get a big pop-off. I'm not planning to play this in my upgraded version of the deck. As I've mentioned, Soul Bond Resolve several times, and I think Soul Bond Resolve will be very strong in newer builds of Boltyn. But there are deck building considerations you can look at for Solar Plexus to try and build some sort of combo-y pop-off turn using V of the Vanguard and Art of War. Next up, we get some tokens with the deck. It's really good that they give you these. It's double-sided Quicken and Courage. As you upgrade your Boltyn deck, you'll probably find that there's, other tokens you can use. For example, there's a Banneret that uses Spellbound Aegis, but I believe this should cover everything that comes in the Armory deck. Alright, so those are the new cards. Let's see what else they give us. So this deck does contain mostly reprints. As you saw, we only have 5 new cards. Which I think is fine. I don't want to get too much into discussion of the philosophy behind Armory decks right now, but I think LSS has done a good job of creating an intro product that has clear paths to upgrade and gives you a good foundation of a deck that you can take to Armories. I'll quickly go over Boltyn's abilities here for anyone unfamiliar with the hero. Boltyn reads, if you charge this turn, your attacks get +1 while defended by an attack action card. Note that this just checks if it's defended by an attack action card. It's not a trigger, and it doesn't stack for each attack action card. You just either are getting the +1 or you are not. Boltyn has an attack reaction. Banish a card from Boltyn's soul. Target attack with attack greater than its base gets go again. So Boltyn's first ability synergizes with this attack reaction because if they get the +1, they will have attack greater than their base, and you can give them go again. You'll see that there's other ways to get attack greater than your base in your deck, either from cards' own effects or things like courage tokens. Next up, we have Raiden Duskbane. This is a sword with once per turn attack. If you charge this turn, this gets +3. So if you're newer to Flesh and Blood, having a 0 cost attack that comes in for 3, very strong, and in my opinion is one of the main draws to playing Boltyn. You do have to jump through the hoop of charging, which often on an individual turn, charging puts you down on a card, but like I mentioned, those charged cards can be cashed in for go again or other uses down the line. I've run a build using Raiden. This is a great card to get in your intro Armory deck and can come in for a lot of consistent damage throughout the game. One thing to note with Raiden is that because it's 0 attack normally, and if you charge this turn gets +3, if you're attacking with this for 3, then you can almost always give it go again with Boltyn's effect. We get a little QR code here. I assume this tells you more about Boltyn. Kind of cool. We get a art of young Boltyn on the back. Next up, we have Lumina Ascension. Very happy that they put this in the deck. I know some people were upset that they didn't include Blood Rush Bellows in the KO deck, and I can understand the arguments for or against that. Lumina Ascension, though, I don't think you can really build a Boltyn deck without Lumina Ascension. It's the main draw to the hero, and most of your games that you win involve playing at least one Lumina Ascension, probably two. So Lumina Ascension, I don't want to go over every card in detail in this video. This is more of a, overview, unboxing, somewhat review of the deck. But effectively what Lumina Ascension does is it lets you attack additional time with your weapon. It gives the weapon +1, and on hit you get to look at the top card of your deck. If it's a light card, you put it into your soul, gain a life, and yeah. So Lumina Ascension, just one Lumina Ascension paired with Raiden. If you think about it, this is a 0 for 5, right? Because Raiden attacks for 3 normally. Lumina Ascension pumps it up to 4, and then you get to attack twice. So versus the normal 3 attack, you would be attacking twice for 8, so that makes Lumina a 0 for 5 effectively. And if you hit both life gain triggers, then that pumps it up to a potential 0 for 7. And when you stack multiple Lumina Ascensions together, this not exponentially increases, but it increases more than the sum of their parts, because the second Lumina Ascension will not only give you an additional attack with Raiden, but it'll make it so that each of the attacks come in more. So if you're able to set up multiple Lumina Ascensions in one turn, then that will greatly increase your chances of victory. V of the Vanguard is up next. So this is 1 cost, 3 attack. As an additional cost to play this, you may charge your hero's soul any number of times, and your attacks this combat chain get +1 for each light card you charge this way. So this is a big pop-off sort of card because it pumps your whole combat chain. Notably, because it is pumping your light attack, your attacks, they will presumably have attack greater than their base, so you can give them each go again. So this really enables some go wide turns where you may not otherwise be able to do it. Now, one thing to note with Lumina Ascension is that because Lumina Ascension is a non-attack action, playing it will close the combat chain. So V of the Vanguard and Lumina Ascension do not synergize super well together unless you have another card that is not included in this deck. It is, I'm blanking on the name of that card right now, but it is a legendary card from Dynasty. Apologies for blanking on the name of that card. Alright, so here we get some red charging attacks. A lot of Boltyn's cards care about you charging, so it's good to start with a base of a lot of red charge attacks. You can think of these as your chain starters. Do pay attention to the card text on these, because some of them will give you additional effects if you charged for that card, such as Light the Way, where as an additional cost to play this, you may charge your hero's soul. When this hits, if a yellow card was charged this way, this gets go again. So Light the Way cares about if you charge specifically to its effect. Other cards, such as Take Flight, just read, if you've charged this turn, this gets go again. So that means you don't have to charge specifically to Take Flight's effect. So if, for example, you have Light the Way and Take Flight in hand, and another card you want to charge, you generally will want to start with the Light the Way, and then follow it up with the Take Flight, because Light the Way wants to see that you've charged its effect, whereas Take Flight just cares if you charge. There are other considerations there, of course. Are you able to give the Light the Way go again in case they block it and you can't get the on-hit go again? But there's a lot of situational things like that to keep in mind when playing Boltyn that make him, in my opinion, one of the more interesting heroes to play in Flesh and Blood. Next up, we get another strong red attack, Snatch. It's just a 0 for 4, blocks 2. When this hits, draw a card. This is a very strong card in many decks over the history of Flesh and Blood. Works well with Boltyn, because if they block it with an attack action and you've charged this turn, it'll pump it up, which both makes it harder to block, so you can get that on hit. And it allows you to give it go again, which giving Snatch go again is very good, so you can actually use the card that you draw with it. Good inclusion in this deck as well, because it's, useful in a lot of other decks, so good for a new player. Do note it is not a light card, so any of your cards that specifically care about light cards do not work with Snatch. Next up, we get some attack reactions, Courageous Steel Hand and Resounding Courage. Both of these will give +3. Courageous Steel Hand only gives it +3 if you've charged. Resounding Courage always gives it +3, but if you've charged, you also get a Courage token. Right now, in my personal Boltyn deck, I'm running Courageous Steel Hand and not Resounding Courage. I have tried Resounding Courage in the past, and the one cost on it can sometimes be difficult with Boltyn because you don't run blues, you mostly run reds and yellows. However, both are, good cards to have in your arsenal for when you're experimenting with different Boltyn deck lists. And by in your arsenal, I mean available to you, not literally in your arsenal, though sometimes they end up there. One quick note, cards like Courageous Steel Hand are great for helping you give attacks go again because they pump the attack above the base. So that's another way to enable those wide turns. Next up, we get Sink Below. Again, similar to Snatch, this is a very good card to get in a new deck. Even more so than Snatch, Sink Below is played in almost every single Flesh and Blood deck, so getting a full set here is great. Like I said, you'll probably be putting these in every deck. I think I have at least 3 sets of Sink Belows between my decks, and I'm happy to get 3 more in this Armory deck. I'll probably end up using them. Next up, we have a set of Bannerets. These are yellow attacks that give you an additional effect when they're charged. Banneret of Vigor gains you a resource, and Banneret of Resilience makes it so the next action card you defend with this turn gets +1. So notably, Banneret of Vigor, you want to charge on your turn, so next time you hit, you'll gain a resource. Can't trigger that effect on your opponent's turn. And Banneret of Resilience, you only want to use on your opponent's turn 2 cards like Saving Grace or your new equipment in order to get that bonus defense. There are also some Majestic Bannerets from Dusk Till Dawn that I run in my personal Boltyn deck if you're looking for upgrades. Next up, we have a set of yellow cards. Looks like these are a lot of the same attacks that we have from the red charge cards. It's good to have a good density of yellows in Boltyn because he does have cards that care specifically about yellow cards, such as the new equipment. Such as the new equipment or that card Light the Way we looked at earlier. These cards specifically can also be used as chain starters because they charge to their own effects. Next up, we have some cards that you can view as payoffs for charging. So Valiant Thrust is a 1 attack for 3. It's at yellow, so good for the yellow synergies in the deck. And if you've charged this turn, this gets +3. So a 1 for 6 at yellow is pretty high above rate. Usually you can expect 1 for 4 at yellow, so 1 for 6 is 2 above that. And if it pumps as well, then that allows you to give it go again. Now, Battlefield Blitz is 1 attack lower if you've charged, but it naturally gets 2 attack lower if you've charged, but it naturally gets go again if you've charged. So this versus Valiant Thrust allows you to save a card in Soul for use later. And then lastly, we have the 2 non-foil copies of Saving Grace, which we went over at the beginning. So that's the Boltyn deck. I think this is a great foundation for anyone looking to play Boltyn. And while there are some obvious upgrades, such as Soulbound Resolve and Spirit of Arena, which is the legendary I couldn't remember the name of earlier, as well as Beacon of Victory, which I was a little surprised Beacon of Victory wasn't in this deck, but it gives you a good upgrade path for Boltyn, and none of those cards I mentioned are especially expensive, so I think this Armory deck is a great introduction for a new player, and LSS did a great job with this. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and let me know if you'd like me to follow up with my personal Boltyn deck that you could view as an upgrade to this deck if you're curious on how you can make it better. Thank you.